All right, guys, thank you for joining us today. We have Austin Kjergaard here, who is also known as the Physique RD. He is a coach for contest prep and lifestyle athletes alike, and he works under the philosophy of your journey is our passion. In addition to holding a degree in nutritional science and dietetics, Austin has also spent extensive time working with mentors to refine his craft, such as Dr. Joe Klemczewski, and he leverages his background as a registered dietitian to support athletes in all levels, from amateur all the way to pro, and amplifying their potential both on and off the stage through the power of nutrition. Austin is also the very first bodybuilder from South Dakota to turn pro in the NGA and the IPE circuit. He's still an active competitor with plans to return to the stage in 2026, now that he is a two-time natural pro champion. He is a judge for the OCB, NGA, INBA, PNBA, and has great feedback for people in our group to help them with the judging feedback and giving us that judge's eye. He lives with his wife and their pup in South Dakota, Taylor and Koa. And Austin, thank you so much for joining us today. Can't wait to talk to you about some things nutrition.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to jump into this.
Yeah, so we came across you because you really are a rare breed in the bodybuilding industry. There's a lot of course, nutrition is such a huge part of what we do and what we need to follow to be successful, but there are not a lot of people who are registered dietitians in this industry. So it's very special that that's your background, and very special that you've worked with Dr. Joe and you're applying to, all of the knowledge that you have to bodybuilders. So do you mind just giving us a little bit more background on yourself and that journey?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I started competing back in 2007, so I've been competing for a while. I started reading the bodybuilding magazines, obviously, and then one of the stores, the local stores that we have here, had natural bodybuilding and fitness. And I had actually recently met a natural bodybuilder. This was before I was going to go to college and do sports. And so I started buying those magazines and just seeing Dr. Joe all over the place in these magazines and whatnot. And then when I got to college, I realized, man, this is not probably what I want to do. I kind of want to try this bodybuilding thing. So I took up bodybuilding, started doing as much research as I could. Back in those days, it was like bodybuilding.com forums and magazines. Those were your main sources. Like, people weren't putting out the free information on YouTube yet for like physique sports stuff, at least not yet. So prepped myself a few times, then hired a coach, then, hired a different coach, and kind of a long story short, just through this whole journey, um, I was traveling a lot and just kind of reached out to Joe a little bit later in life, where I'm like, hey, I have an idea. I'd like to do something, follow your career. It was just kind of a whole, like, let's just throw that out there. And he responded, sure, like, why not? Let's record some stuff. And then my wife and I actually flew him out here in Sioux Falls because we were going to host like a physique and fitness camp. And then throughout that weekend, Joe and I just got to know each other really well. So him and I have collaborated a lot of things. It's kind of how I got to know him. And I guess for people listening, I know we've probably got a broad group. Dr. Joe is like the founder of like flexible dieting and if it fits your macros and things like that. So he's the guy that really pioneered a lot of that stuff. He worked with Lane Norton back in the day. That was one of his clients, and Lane kind of took that and really blew that into what it is now, also because he was doing a lot of stuff on YouTube. So just to kind of give a brief background and lineage of like Dr. Joe and all of the flexible dieting and whatnot. And so anyways, that's kind of how I got connected with him. And then just for myself along the way, I was inspired in between that time frame to go back to school to become a dietitian. I was working with a lot of clients, just personal training and just the nutrition advice that I knew that I was able to give legally. And then I didn't want to have a ceiling. I wanted to be able to help people. I had a lot of females, interestingly enough, reach out to me where they had bad experiences with coaches and they had a lot of health problems. And I'm like, legally, I can't help you at that time. The rules have kind of changed now, but a lot of this inspired me to go back to school to become a dietitian because I just didn't want to turn anybody away. I didn't have a lot of big networks that I trusted to refer for coaches at the time. So I was like, I just need to go back to school and do this. And so that's what I did to become a registered dietitian. And now I use my knowledge to try to help physique athletes. And when you become a dietitian, you learn a lot of clinical nutrition. And I've had to use some of my clinical nutrition background as well to help physique athletes because, everybody has different health needs, health issues. Even us physique athletes, somebody might encounter a health issue and they need some help, and that's where a dietitian can be beneficial. So I've just been blessed to have a great network of people now and to be able to use my degree for a positive way to help people so they don't hurt themselves and that they can get to the stage or get off the stage in a healthy form.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, thank you so much for explaining who Dr. Joe is, because I skimmed right over that. So I appreciate
No,
you
that's
going
okay.
into
I
that.
kind of brought it. I brought it up. I know we've got our little notes here that we're going through and stuff. So, and I just when I brought his name up, I'm like, there might be people that don't know who Joe
Yeah.
is. You know, I just
Yep.
better
He's
quickly
an
explain
OG.
Joe.
Yeah, thank you. But your story really makes me think of someone who followed their passion and turned it into an occupation, which I always love a story like that. So I love that you just fell in love with the sport, fell in love with this aspect of the process for bodybuilding, and made absolutely the most that you could out of it with going the RD route.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it's been a long journey, but it's definitely been worth it, and I wouldn't change it. So.
Yeah. Well, today we are going to talk about something that's very, very relevant this time of year. There's a lot of people who are wrapping up their competition season, going into the holidays, which is an extremely challenging time to be reversing or coming off stage. So, can you give us a brief overview of how you coach athletes to set themselves up for post-show success?
Yeah, this has been such a hot topic, I feel like lately, and it's really been encouraging to see other people in the group bring this up. Like, hey, I'm struggling. Like, and I say that's encouraging because I feel like a lot of like my clients, they kind of feel like they're the only ones going through this. And I
Mhm.
think as a client, that just might be a natural feeling like, man, I feel like I've just really struggled with gaining weight or I've struggled with binge eating and I just cannot control my hunger. So, to answer your question, I always have the conversation before we even start their prep to say, hey, like just so you're aware, once we get off the stage, it can be even harder because now we're not having that goal that we're shooting for.
Yeah.
So I every so often throughout prep, I try to always remind my clients like we got to prepare for this, so that way they're not blindsided. Sometimes even though I've warned them once they get off the stage, they're like, wow, I did not realize how hard this was going to be because now I'm not getting asked how often I'm competing anymore, or I'm not,
Yeah.
getting the compliments like, hey, you look so lean, and I just don't feel like I'm super lean. I can't stop eating. There's all of these things that a lot of my clients have struggled with. And so what I always preach is making sure people have a good social support system. So, like me as a coach, and some of my clients, I'm like their only social support system when it comes to like this
Yeah.
lifestyle because their family does not work out at all, or their husband or wife doesn't work out or doesn't, live this lifestyle, so they just don't understand. So they just don't have a lot of positive encouragement in their corner. So
Hmm.
that's kind of where I start with a lot of my clients. I just make sure that we're doing a little bit more checking in than like once a week. We do every other day, like how are things going? Where are you struggling with? So I really try to kind of just be that social support for them. And then I try to provide, depending on that person's situation, like what they're struggling with, I'll provide something that's within my scope of practice. Um,
Hmm.
to make sure that I'm helping them be successful. There have been extreme cases where I've had people just develop a consistent binge eating disorder where we've had to kind of pull in, like a mental health counselor, which they were very receiving of. And then we
Hmm.
kind of develop our own little care team. Here's that clinical background in my head,
Yeah.
where, it's okay to like, if you're really struggling with this, to bring in a mental health professional because again that's not within my scope of practice. I can recommend things nutritionally and things to try, but sometimes again when you have like somebody like a mental health counselor, if you really need it, and someone like a dietitian or your coach or whatever, that's that social support system that you are starting to build that can help you through
Yeah.
this difficult time. So that's a
I
big answer. It's a big answer to your question, but I know we have a lot of people that might be watching this. So there's a lot of ways that I approach it because everybody's response to prep is different. Some it's binge eating, some it's seclusion. They don't want to go to the gym because they feel like they've gained too much weight. Some it's back to
uh,
restricted eating. So there's a lot of things, and it just depends on what they're struggling with.
Yeah, you put out some really great content just recently on your Instagram. That was that dark side of competing that touches on a lot of this, and it's good to talk about. We want the glamorous side is great, and this sport can be so transformational and so empowering for people. But there definitely is a dark side. I just made a note while you were saying this because I think I picked up on something that you said that I think is really important. And I don't know that I know that not all coaches do this. So you said that while they are in prep, you're already having a conversation with them that's like, hey, it's not done yet when it's done.
Yeah.
Because I feel like mentally as a competitor and having competed and had like that finish line of show day in your head, you can kind of like really look at that as a finish line, but this sport is very different. So it's like that you're going to cross that peak, if you will, and then you're basically going to be off ramping for, however many weeks afterwards. I would say like what a minimum of like 6 weeks that you really still need to be in that prep mindset where you're very, very dialed and you are fighting hunger. And that is such a hard thing. I love that you have that conversation because if you can mentally stretch that finish line out a little bit further, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll even go as far as depending on like the client and their financial situation, I'll encourage they do more than one show for that reason. Um, when you get stage lean, you know this, like when you get stage lean, it's a lot. It takes a lot out of you. And then when you just get done with one show, you might be on stage for 5 minutes, depending,
I know.
you could, even NPC shows, you might be waiting hours to go on stage and you're up there no more than five, at max 10 minutes. And then you're like, man, that was it. Like I had so much fun, but that's it. So if you
Yeah.
have like maybe two or three shows, if you can afford it and you line them up, it doesn't always work out this way, right? But like maybe it's like you do a show 2, 3 weeks down the road, you do another show, two, three, that makes it feel more sport-like because you've got
Yeah.
multiple shows. And by the third one, people are like, I'm pretty tired, man. I'm ready for this off season. I'm craving that off season. And then, it's like, okay, you've now um, had multiple shows to peak for, multiple things to strive for,
Yeah.
and now we can continue that conversation like, hey, you still could. I know you're excited for the off season, so that makes me happy to hear you're looking forward to it in a positive
Mhm.
way. But we have to still make sure we take things slowly because we don't want to like engorge ourselves. And sometimes for people, it's also scheduling like a photo shoot, like 1 month from the show, right? Now it's like, okay, I have to stay on for a month. I can gain some weight back, but I can't go too crazy because I have like a photo shoot I'm going to do. That's fine too to kind of help extend that introduction to the off season, if you will, or the reverse diet. And then it's the same thing though when you have that photo shoot and it's done, like you still have to have that conversation of like, okay, the photo shoot's done, all of the kind of the glam to the contest prep season is over with. Now we have to focus on building. Um,
Yeah.
and so again, there's also something that we didn't really touch on, and I didn't put in my video because I feel like it's another conversation that is kind of that FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. There's a lot of people that like they know they've got to take at least 1 or 2 years off and they see all of their friends or other people competing. And so that kind of like can create some psychological problems as well. Like, man, I feel like I look like this and these girls or these guys, they look awesome. Like, so that's where I always try to have the conversation with my clients after they get done. How can we make sure that you're putting yourself in a positive mindset and putting yourself in positive surroundings, because those are like two of the biggest things where people kind of struggle with once they get off that stage.
Yeah. You've also gotten so used to seeing yourself super lean too. So, I mean, there's the comparison, even if we don't realize we're doing it, but we may be comparing ourselves to how we looked, 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and that can be really hard. So I love the idea of a photo shoot. And you mentioned so many little psychological hacks in there that I think are really helpful. And I love that you will refer out to the mental health side, but it really, as a registered dietitian, you guys do have really strong backgrounds in behavioral coaching. And there's a lot that goes into like setting people's mindset up for success.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do dive into like mental health in relation to nutrition, right? Whether it's bulimia, anorexia, again, binge eating disorder.
Binging, yeah.
There's even a newer term that's come out over the last maybe 10 years, orthoxia, which is just kind of like an obsession of like high level nutrition foods, meaning like
Hmm.
people like hyperactive obsess about like the types of food that they're eating, which is interesting because obviously we want to eat healthy, but of course, there are warning signs where people take things like too far. So these are things that we learn about and that we have to continue to learn about and how to approach them and how do we approach them in a nutritional side of things that's within our scope of practice. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things that I learned in school that it does hit home with me because I've been coaching people a long time, whether it's for the physique sport world or even just for lifestyle, just people have issues when it comes to the relationship that they have with their bodies or the relationship that they have
Yeah.
with food. So that's why I think it's just important to make sure that you have, and I'll keep referring it to as the social support system, whether it's a best friend,
Hmm.
a coach, a mentor, a mental health counselor, somebody that you can have to depend on, because it can kind of feel lonely when you get off that stage sometimes if you don't have that. So like you said
For
earlier,
sure.
you just got done seeing this beautiful transformation of yourself. And what people I think don't realize is like there's still a beautiful transformation happening in the off season. It just doesn't feel like it because we're not as lean. You know what I mean? But
It's
we are
not what we were
building things
looking for.
underneath. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a totally different mindset. I feel like we could go I just have so much that I could say about just people's experience post show and things like that, but I want to make sure we get into some of the mechanics since we do have your expertise here. So one of the big things that comes up is that people who are trying their best to follow their reverse are dying in the process. Like they're just starving. It's a very slow, very tedious process. So the question comes up about how much is actually appropriate to eat in what situations. When is a reverse appropriate versus a recovery diet? And would you mind elaborating on the difference between those?
Yeah, great question. So the reverse diet got popular, a few years ago now because people started noticing like, man, if I just start slowly adding calories back in and doing it slowly, I can stay leaner for a longer period of time and I get to eat more food, which is, a great concept. Even like research is starting to be done now in this realm. That tells you how new it is. Like we don't even have a ton of research to prove this, but we have probably almost close to millions of people now or hundreds of thousands of people now anecdotally that we've seen have phenomenal body composition changes by doing a proper reverse diet. But then, unfortunately, when reverse dieting started to become popular, there were also people in the coaching world that's like giving their clients like super tiny amounts, like, hey, I'm gonna give you 5 grams of carbs this week. Like when
Yep.
you just come off of like a stage, like that's practically nothing. You know what I mean?
Like death by 5 grams of carb a week.
Yeah, and to your point, then people start feeling like worse. They're like, when is like when am I gonna feel better? Like you've only given me like 100 calories in like a month. Like I am dying over here. So then another group of coaches were like, this isn't good either. Like we know that the body can self-regulate really well. Why don't we just, reestablish your maintenance, like what your body's maintenance is right now, and just give you your food or whatever. Like we'll just if you're gonna eat 2,500 calories, let's just give you 25 calories. Your body will just do what it needs to. And again, in theory, for someone that's really struggling like with eating and things like that, I can understand the psychological aspect because we just want to feel better, right? We just don't want these hunger pains anymore. And I'm one of those. Like in the early phase of reverse dieting, I was like, I got super, super lean and man, I was so incredibly hungry and I was even getting like
Mhm.
dizzy and stuff like that. And this was a long time ago. Like I hadn't even went back to school yet. And so I just started making bigger increases in my uh, calorie intake and started to feel better. So you could say it was like a modified version between a reverse and a recovery. So you have your reverse diet, slowly adding calories back in over an extended period of time. Then you have your recovery diet, which is basically going from whatever calories you went from off the stage to whatever your new quote maintenance is. And the reason I have the quotes there is because people forget like your maintenance calories at your stage weight is going to be different than your maintenance calories at your start weight because your body composition is different. You have less fat. Because you have less fat, in theory, you should have more muscle tissue in theory.
Yeah.
Um, and your activity level is going to be different because you just got done coming off the stage. Maybe you were lifting 4 days a week in the off season, and now you're 5 days a week in contest prep. You were doing no cardio in the off season. You're doing a bunch of so like all of these factors play into what new quote maintenance would be. And for myself and clients that I've worked with, the reverse diet just seems to work better. I would say the way not to do a reverse diet is doing those small 5 gram changes, uh, finding a balance of like, okay, here was my calories when I got off the stage. I'm going to increase them maybe by a couple hundred, maybe 250 calories right off the bat so I can start to feel a little bit better because that's a
Hmm.
significant amount. And then I'll just see how I'm feeling for the next like 7 to 10 days. And then I'll start making, you know, medium-sized gaps, I'll call them, or medium-sized increases in my calories. So it's not 5 grams of carbs, but it might be like 60 calories here or 80 calories here for the first couple weeks till we start to feel better. And then it's like maybe, all right, maybe I'll do like a 40 or 50 calorie increase every other week because now I'm not feeling so bad and my body composition is looking a little bit different. Where when people do the recovery diet, excuse me, and they jump up, they feel better, but then they start putting on weight a lot faster. And then you run into, again, psychology issues where it's like,
Yeah.
holy cow, I'm gaining weight really fast. I don't really like how I look, but I feel better. And then, hopefully that person has a coach that's helping them to be like, hey, pump the brakes here. We can't go back to restricted eating right now because then we're going to fall into this, gain lose cycle that a lot of people fall into. So that's the difference between like a reverse and a recovery diet and how both can have problems and then how both can
Yeah.
also have like, a positive outcome.
And to help me make sure I'm tracking, whenever we're saying that we're bringing them to maintenance calories, that would not be the maintenance for their stage weight. That would be a maintenance for like a healthy improvement season weight, or is it somewhere in between?
Yeah,
Because
good
that,
question. Good
yeah,
question. So like obviously like when you're calculating your maintenance, you're starting at like your new weight, right? And the reason I say the
yeah,
new weight is because like let's say you have a person that lost like 50 pounds, 40, 50
to,
pounds for their,
yeah,
most likely if they plan on competing again, we don't want them to be 40 or 50 pounds above stage weight,
yeah.
right? Most of the time. Like even bodybuilders realistically shouldn't want to be that heavy to just pull off a bunch of weight because they could lose a substantial amount of muscle and they just could be putting on a
Mhm.
ton of fat too. It just depends on the
Ton of
person.
stress on your body too in the process.
100%. Now, I think a happy medium is half that, right? Like, I think for
Yeah.
most people, depending on the time frame, right, 15 to 25, maybe 30 pounds,
Hmm.
depending again on a few other factors, would be an appropriate rate of gain. So you kind of calculate where the calories are, where they're at, but you also have to consider that's not where they're going to be at. So it's kind of a, you know what I mean? Kind of a bit of both. Like here's where calories are starting at, but just know this is actually still kind of low and we're going to try to get you up to here. So that way,
Yeah.
by the time we get you up to here, you have hopefully only gained 10, 15, maybe 20 pounds. Again, and these factors I'm talking about are you going to compete in a year or are you going to compete in 3 years? Are you getting so lean that you have striated glutes? Because that's a whole different type of lean, like in a bodybuilder. Um, and then I preach a lot of blood work. I think I've mentioned this a couple times too in our groups and things like that. But like,
Yeah.
um, you know, we might say, hey, I like how I look at 15 pounds over stage weight, but our blood work, our hormones and things like that might say I don't. And we got to get up to, and we've got to get up to 25, 30 pounds because hormones are a big driver for us. You know what I mean? If our testosterone, and ladies, testosterone, estrogen, estradiol, if those things are all tanked, we need to make sure that those are in an appropriate range before we even jump back into prep. Because as we get lean,
Yeah.
everything down regulates. So, that's why I say like a range like that would be appropriate for gaining 15, 25 pounds, but maybe for somebody it's 30 is that marker. So
I appreciate that, and I'm gonna ask a follow-up question because I feel like this is gonna come up in the listeners' minds because it's a big like controversy in the industry. You mentioned that the amount of weight you gain coming off into your improvement season is going to depend on all these different factors, and of course, like how tall you are. Like 30 pounds on someone that's 5 foot versus 5'11 is very different. But do you, and it's you don't have to have like a concrete answer for this by any means because it's almost like an art crossing with the science. But do you have a range that you try to shoot for to keep people, say that they're going to compete again in 1 to 2 years? Would you have a general range where you would try to keep them to keep their body composition under control?
yeah, for sure. I would say probably again, depending on like the look and how aggressive it is, 15, 20 pounds maybe, because
Yeah.
I think people get their time frames confused as well. Like, so when someone's like, I want to compete in 2 years. Okay, so does that mean you're going to step on stage 2 years from July? Let's say you got off the stage in
Hmm.
July, you're going to compete July 2026. Well, that means that you're probably going to start dieting, in January of 2026 or February. So you really only have like 16, 18 months of growth. You don't have the full 24 months. So I think people also have to
Yeah.
look at that being a factor as well. I see that very commonly when people are like, oh, I'm going to take a year off. Well, really, they took like 8 months off and then
True.
they
True.
started dieting for 4 months, and now it's 12
Yeah.
months, right? So they didn't really spend enough time, in my opinion, for growing. Enhanced athletes, it's a little bit different, right? They have different recovery. They can grow a little bit differently, and but if you're like a natural athlete, you're probably going to need a little more time than like 8 months out of that off season.
Yeah.
Um, So that's why I say like 15, 20 pounds is probably appropriate for most men and women. And again, on like the look, if they're going to step on stage in 24 months, because realistically, they're probably going to start dieting 6 months out or 5 months out, maybe, depending on how much weight and how fast they want to lose it. If they want to try, I'm sorry, I'm opening up a can of worms here, but if they want to try like
You're fine.
if they want to try like a mock peak week, or if they want to try, something to make sure they have enough time. So they're only going to get about an 18-month off season. Well, it doesn't make sense
Yeah.
to put on 30 pounds if you're going to pull it all off. If you gain half that again, like 15, that's probably okay. But if that person's feeling like trash, then we might need
They
to
may have
gain,
to keep
maybe
going.
we have to gain a little
Yeah.
bit more. So I would say 15 to 20 pounds is pretty appropriate for most men and women.
And that probably makes most people pretty happy too, because I like just from personal anecdotal experience, I'm probably a little over 20 pounds above my stage weight. And that's a really comfortable spot for me. Like that is like normal person lean for me. And I think that that's tough. Like whenever you're coming off stage, because we're like 20 pounds sounds like a lot of weight to gain. Like that sounds awful. But if you can lock your like mind around that is okay and like get detached from the value of the number on the scale and just be comfortable in your skin and comfortable with the energy levels and the gains and things like that, then it becomes a totally different 20 pounds.
It does, and it's a different body composition. So, like, if you're
Yeah.
around 20, let's say you're 22 pounds above stage weight. I know you've shared some of like your photos and stuff. Like you have a lot of muscle, like you have an athletic frame, and like to walk around at stage lean with your athletic frame, you're gonna feel terrible. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like, like you need to preserve that muscle that you have, and if somebody sees you out and about in your off-season form, they're not gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, that person's 20 pounds over stage weight. They are
I know it
so
sounds like
overweight."
so much.
No, they're gonna be like, "That person looks healthy as crap." Like, are you serious? Like, we have to also be kinder to ourselves. I tell my clients this all the time. We have to be
Yes.
kinder to ourselves because it's like stage lean is such a different animal than being like beach lean. It is such a different animal. That is the
Yes.
sport that we are in. Like I tell people when they ask, like, is that healthy? Is that healthy to, well, is football healthy? I played football. I wrestle. I wrestled. I do jujitsu. Like concussions, broken limbs, like all of that's a risk. Our risk is being super, super lean, right?
Yeah.
Leaner than most people can fathom getting, but that's not how any of us really should be walking around all the time. So we have to be kinder to ourselves and say, like, hey, if I get 20 pounds above stage weight, I'm actually going to probably look really freaking good. I'm going to look fuller. I'm still going to look
Yeah.
lean. If I do my reverse and my building correctly, I'm going to feel good. Like we don't have to feel like trash 24/7. You know what I mean? It is
Such an
okay to,
important message.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay to
And
feel good. Um,
yes.
but at the same time, I understand like if we're like I typically feel more on the higher end of what I've suggested. Like I like 30 pounds above stage weight, maybe even 35, and that's just I feel good, I feel strong, I feel like I can still see a lot of
Yeah.
like conditioning and maybe it's just for me, that's just where I feel good. But for some people like trying to lose that much weight, that seems like a scare to them. I don't want to lose 30 or 35 pounds, kind of like you mentioned. For me, I knew I was going to take a gap in competing, like, because I was trying to
Mhm.
finish school. So it wasn't a priority for me to be 20 pounds above stage weight. So that's just a different situation. But I say that because, like, that kind of goes against my recommendations. For people that are
But it's
competing,
important. I'm glad you shared that.
yeah, but for people that are competing more frequently, more actively, then we have to ask ourselves, like, risk reward, risk reward. Like, how much
Yeah.
weight do we need to put on versus how much we pull off? I do somewhat disagree. Like there is some, I think, research, like if we even get like 5 or 10 pounds, like you're fine, as far as like energy and body composition. I'm not sure I agree with it 100% because of like the hormone production side. We do need,
Yeah.
a little more body fat. We do need a little more caloric intake. Now, maybe in different types of individuals like marathon runners and things like that, I could understand like maybe they gain 5, 8 pounds in their off season and that's fine. But those types of athletes, they don't want a ton of muscle because it'll slow their pace down. That's one of the rare
Yeah.
situations where okay, seeing a little bit of muscle loss because those are endurance athletes, right? They want to move at a faster pace for a long distance. We're talking about people that we're physique athletes. We want to be judged on our muscle and our symmetry and our conditioning. So,
Yeah.
anyways, I'm trying not to stray off topic here, but that's kind of where I would tell people an appropriate amount is to gain in those couple years, how to,
Mhm.
shift the mindset of like, oh, I'm 20 pounds above stage weight or 25, even if you were 25 pounds, like it's not that big of a deal. Like you have to think, when's the next time you're going to get back on stage and how do you look? Maybe this is the best you've ever looked at 25 pounds over stage weight. Like
Yeah.
there's value to that.
That's such a great reframe, and I'm thank you for letting us go down that rabbit hole. And that 'cause I feel like that comes up a lot, and it's just something I kind of want to give people a hug and tell them it's okay. Like it's fine to be up because it's just we get so attached to the numbers. But I do want to circle back a little bit to the reverse versus recovery approach. So we talked about the death by 5 grams of carbs a week. If somebody is working with a coach that is bringing them up really, really slowly like this, I literally just had a conversation with somebody about this the other day. She's off stage for a few weeks. She's still losing weight because she's coming up so slowly. And I'm sure some of it's inflammation coming down, but she's starving, waking up at night hungry, like really struggling with it. How would you say that someone can bring that up to their coach? And how could you ask to maybe be shifted to a more aggressive recovery or reverse?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question and a great kind of case study to bring up. I would just be the biggest thing as as a coach is honesty. Like don't, and maybe this person's already been honest and their coach just is like, no, 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 just trust the process. Like I can understand the trusting the process, but if the process is not safe, we have to
Mhm.
advocate for our own self and our health. So I have to say like, make sure you're honest with your coach, number one. Just say, hey, like I'm waking up
Communicate.
in a lot of like pain. Like I'm having so much hunger pains. Here's the foods that I'm eating. Is there something that I should change with like foods? Maybe this individual isn't eating a lot of volume right now. So volume foods, maybe going back to some prep foods that have more volume and make them feel better might be helpful. Um, but I just have that conversation and say, is there a way we can find a happy medium? Like, I don't know what this coach is doing, so I'm just creating a situation here. But like, hey, you're giving me like 10 grams of carbs a week right now, and I am just starving. Can we just do for like the next 3 weeks, 20 grams or 25 until I start to feel a little better? I understand what some weight might come up, but I'm okay with that, which that client should then have to be honest and say, I'm okay with that. It depends on their situation. But that's how I would approach it. Can we, increase the calories from what we're doing right now for the next 2 or 3 weeks until I can start to feel better? And I'll be mindful of like the weight gain. If I gain like a half
Yeah.
a pound or if I gain 1 pound in the next 2 weeks, like I'm okay with that. Or if I gain 3 pounds in the next 2 weeks, I'm okay with that if I can just start to feel a little better. And then once that happens, then we can pull back and do smaller increases to the calories. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where you can go with that happy medium and how to like approach your coach. Don't just say like, hey, like I watched this video and what you're doing is wrong and I quit. Please don't do that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying have that conversation. But if your coach is not listening to you, and I tell my clients, it's like you are in the driver's seat. This is your journey.
Yeah.
Like you know what I mean? Like advocate for yourself. Um, yes, if you hire a coach, you should listen to them. But if you feel like there's health concerns and things going on and they're not listening to those health concerns, then
Mhm.
that would be that conversation where you need to advocate for yourself and be like, hey, like we need to try something different. Like I'm in pain right now. Like something needs to change. So
Yeah. So the communication is a huge one. And then I like that you said to suggest a different approach. I think that's cool. But my favorite, that's definitely helpful and it's a productive way to come to the conversation. But my favorite thing that you said is that you were in the driver's seat. Ultimately, it's your body, it's your quality of life. And there's a caveat to that because I think people get off stage and it's like, okay, I've got to get back to life. I've got to engage with my family more. Maybe work has been suffering because you weren't cognitively as clear as you could have been. So there's a lot of things that you kind of have to get back to right after. So I think communicating that quality of life, but what it also makes me think of is that the science that's going on in your brain, and this is a great RD question because it's not straightforward. And there's the psychological aspect, and then there's also the physiological aspect. But do you mind going into the science of what's going on and why we are so hungry? Like I came off stage and thinking, this sounds crazy, but whenever I competed last, I was like, I'm gonna die if I don't eat this entire sleeve of rice cakes right now, which is not a rational thought, but it was that like I was convincing myself because I was just that hungry. So do you mind elaborating on why we feel that way after shows in the reverse?
yeah, that's a great question. So the one that I talk about the most is we have hunger hormones known as ghrelin and leptin. I'm sure lots of people have heard, but as we get leaner, ghrelin and leptin shift, right? So you've heard of like ghrelin is like our hunger hormone and leptin is kind of like our we're feeling full and comfortable, right? So those shift. So the one hormone is saying like I'm really hungry because the other hormone's like I don't feel full enough. So we see that
Hmm.
more when we're leaner, and it just feels worse and worse as we get leaner. And some of those hormones as well, those um, those are needing fat, right? And so we have less fat in our body and we're consuming less fat. So that also kind of plays a role in how some of those hormones function. But eventually, and this is where that recovery diet got popular, eventually those hormones will, when you come off the stage and start eating more, they will regulate back to normal. But everyone is
Hmm.
different, right? Like that's where the psychology start comes in. Like, I don't want to gain all this weight right away, or I want to
Yeah.
compete in a year. So it's kind of like your body doesn't really care about any of that, right? It cares about just feeling better and performing better. So that's why like you get off the stage and you're like, I'm so hungry. Plus your body's insulin is going to be a little more sensitive. You're going to have, because we're not consuming as much blood or blood sugar. We're not consuming as much like glucose from our diet, so our blood sugars tend to run a little bit lower, right? And so we have that, and we have our hunger hormones being shifted. And so once we come off the stage and we just start gorging ourselves, now those hunger hormones temporarily are like, oh man, this is fantastic. I'm feeling really good. I start to feel full. But that's only temporary. Like I said, like then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you wake up the next day and you're just as hungry. And then you just feel like you don't have an off button. And I remember in the very early stages of competing, I was eating so much afterwards because again, I didn't really have any advice at the time, right? I was having like acid reflux basically for like days. I just kept
Yeah.
eating. And so that's a problem when we give into our hunger cues, like yes, your ghrelin and leptin levels are going to be shifted and adjusted, but know that they can and will bounce back. We just have to take things slowly. And the other thing that I have to remind people too, it's okay to be hungry. It's definitely not okay to be like in pain. So like what I mean by that is like if you are I've had the being so hungry you're in pain. I've had that experience before, so I can speak on that. But it's kind of one of those things where like, man, I'm hungry and I feel like I could eat. You don't need to eat right away either. You might be able
Yeah.
to extend it out an extra hour, drink some water, and just go move around. Because I think some people get worried, like, oh, I'm hungry, like I should eat something right now.
Yeah.
And some of that maybe is because they've been hungry for so long during prep. They're just so tired of feeling hungry. So I can understand that. So we have to look at what's happening with us. Are we eating enough? Are we starting to eat more, I should say? Are we increasing our calories appropriately? Is this just going to be a temporary hunger that I can deal with in an hour because I'm going to eat my next meal in an hour? Or is it something that's like it feels so uncontrolled, that I just feel like I'm going to grab everything in the house and start eating it all?
Yeah.
So we have to look at you had mentioned this earlier. We have to look at like what's going on physiologically, like with our hormones, and we have to go and look at what's going on psychologically and what we're telling ourselves, like I'm so hungry, I need to eat, and we have to bridge that gap between those two things.
And you mentioned something earlier too, that, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there's kind of whenever you're coming off of show and you're so hungry and your brain's been in that state of flight or fight for so long, you may have eaten a full meal and you can feel it in your stomach, like I am full, like I can feel it, but my brain is still like go, go, eat, eat, eat. And so there's just like a bit of a disconnect between the two, right? Whenever you're in that state.
Yeah, there's definitely a disconnect because again, your stomach is saying like, hey, I am comfortable, I have expanded, and I'm feeling like satiated, right? And
Yeah.
then our brain is saying like, well, I could maybe eat a little bit more. Like, like right,
Mhm.
there's that's that self-happiness that can come along with like food makes me happy and I want to keep eating.
Yeah.
I'm happy right now, right? And that's kind of what I mean by
True.
like those hunger cues, like uh I understand that we're hungry and that we want to eat more, and it might temporarily make us feel better right now because we love food. But long term, are we going to love ourselves? Are we going to feel really
Yeah.
good about ourselves tomorrow in a week because we just can't seem to stop the eating right now? You know what I mean? So, yeah, there
Right.
is definitely something that's going on in our brains that's telling us we can eat more. And a lot of it is the positive association that we have with food and how food makes us feel.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So we talked about giving people kind of a heads up, like, hey, after the show, you're going to be off ramping, like it's not done when it's done. I think that's a good way to lead into it. I think understanding the science of what's going on in your brain and how you're going to feel, and that this is really extreme and very challenging for a lot of people, is huge. But also kind of knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, like it, everybody I've ever seen go through this, they get better eventually and their hunger cues stabilize and they feel better and their body stabilizes and things like that. So is it fair to ask for a duration for how long that people should expect until they start feeling better, or a way that people can like mentally look forward to that process so they know there's a light at the end of the tunnel?
That's such a good question. It's a tough one to answer, but it's a good question. I would say it could be anywhere from like 6 to 16 weeks for people. Um, I haven't had too many people where they're like, I feel amazing 1 month post show. And when I say amazing, like by their hunger, like I'm great, I'm hungry, I feel fantastic. I mean, I have had a couple one-offs in that situation. But they're also clients that are going to be competing soon. You know what I mean? Like they're taking a
Hmm.
short off season because they're going to do another competition season, and then after that, like I've got clients focusing on next year, but they just got off the stage. So right now they're feeling okay because they're eating more food, but they're also like, I know I'm going to be prepping soon. So for where I'm at right now, I feel good. Long term wise, I have not had a lot of people being like, I feel fantastic. I feel like my old self again after like a month. So usually like 6 to 16 weeks in my experience.
Okay.
There is some research. I think I might have discussed something like this one time in the group or something, but there is research that shows like in extreme dieting situations, like a lot of the hormone functions go back within like normal limits between that 6 to 16 week range.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, though, in females, testosterone and our thyroid hormone, our T3 hormone, those took longer to bounce back than normal.
Huh.
Um, and there was a recent study, I shouldn't say recent, I guess 2017, 2018, that actually looked at female competitors and their hormone panel. And that's kind of one of the things that they looked at, coming off the stage. And then other ones
Yeah.
looked at like military people that were in like an extreme calorie deficit and then how long it took for their hormones to come back out of that calorie deficit. So different
Interesting.
groups, but so I say that is like because there is some science to show that like hormones and stuff like that can come back. Some might take longer than others, right? So if we have like a decrease in our thyroid hormone and testosterone, and we see that in our blood work, that makes sense. But for the most part, I would say like if you can buy in for like at least a 4 month reverse,
Yeah.
you should be feeling pretty dang good by month four for sure. And I think most even might feel better by about month three, but again, it depends on how well those first few weeks, because those first few weeks coming off the stage play a big factor of how things are going to go moving forward. And I mean that from like the psychological standpoint. Like if you've struggled with binge eating, it's going to maybe take you a little longer to feel better um, physically because we have to try to work through this binge eating to make sure you're just eating a
Yeah.
sustainable amount of food. And then the psychological aspect of being comfortable that you've gained weight and, kind of where you're at now. So,
I love that you found research on that. That's
yeah,
incredible. And I love that there is research on that. But in 16 weeks, like that's, it's a long time to mentally lock in for, but it may be less. You may be feeling better and you feel
right.
so accomplished in the process. So, a lot of us are very A-type, so we really like to have a number that we can stick on it.
Definitely. It does feel like a long time, especially like I have my clients prep a lot longer because especially if I've never worked with anybody, right? So if my client does a 6 month prep, it's not like that's a fast prep. It's very slow. We're getting to know how the body works. And now you're telling me I got to reverse diet for 4 months. Like you're talking about a 10-month process.
Yeah.
It does sound like a lot, but it also will, you realize if you do it right, you probably will feel better before that 4 month marker, that 4 month post show. It's probably going
Uh-huh.
to be more like 10 to 12 weeks, but I don't like just giving the hard set number because some people might feel good later or sooner. But just to give, like you said, because we all are kind of A types, which is what is that range at least, you might just find that you're just feeling a lot better because this reverse is different than the last one, and so you just
Yeah.
psychologically just feel better because you've put yourself in a better position, and that makes a big difference too.
I know we had multiple topics to go into today, but I just keep thinking of more things I'd love to hear you speak on. So if you don't mind, can you speak to the impacts of so that whenever we're reversing, that's kind of been known as this really big opportunity for metabolic purposes and like you're coming off stage. So can you either debunk or elaborate on like, is that a great opportunity for your metabolism if it's done right, or can it be very detrimental to your metabolism if it's done wrong? Would you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, so just to confirm, like you mean like like the reversing or just getting off stage and eating more, like is it beneficial for the metabolism or not beneficial for the metabolism? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like if somebody, because I feel like people will guilt trip themselves and make the situation worse if they're having a really big issue with binge eating. Like that, then it becomes like, oh, this was this big opportunity to slowly reverse, and my metabolism was going to do X, Y, Z, and I was going to stay at this weight, blah blah blah. Because and then they start binging and they feel like they've like just blown it all, and it's not going to be okay now.
Yeah, that's a, I mean it. The hard answer is like, even though let's say somebody has binged ate, for example, like all progress is not lost, especially coming
Hmm.
off of the stage. I mean, if you're 6 months from the stage and you're still binging, I'm not going to say your progress is lost. I'm just going to say that we've got to try to figure things out because your metabolism is going to adjust based on the adaptations that we place on it. Does that make sense? So like when
Yeah.
we cut calories, our metabolism slows down, right? That is a protective thing. It's kind of like, this is an extreme comparison, but I think it'll be easier for everybody to understand, like starvation, right? If we have somebody that's malnourished, they haven't ate for days, the body, metabolism and all, everything slows down because we are not getting enough energy in to keep it running effectively. So it slows down so we can still live and breathe and move. Um,
Hmm.
but we just don't have enough energy in our system to function optimally. So when we start adding food back in, then our metabolism and our body systems, things start to pick up a little bit, right? So one example, like let's say you lose a bunch of weight, you're not eating as much food, and your blood pressure and your heart rate goes down, right? Well, that makes sense. Like you've lost weight, you've improved your cardiovascular system, but also it's slowing down because you're not eating as much food.
Yeah.
You eat a lot of food, right? And too much food, and blood pressure and your heart rate and stuff like that go up, you have more energy. That's kind of a poor example, but just to kind of give the explanations, one of the reasons why things slow down is a way for us to protect ourselves as well.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but to answer your question, all is not lost. Like it can be beneficial, right, if it's done correctly, because you are going to have a better body composition at a lower body weight. And overall,
Yeah.
most likely, if you spend enough time in a calorie surplus at this lower body weight with more food, most of the time, and again, not always, your hormones are going to come back to normal. So you're just putting yourself in a better position, right? But at the same time, like I don't want someone to be like, well, I've been binge eating for like 3 weeks, I'm screwed. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like continue to work on what's causing the binge, gather your social support
Yeah.
system, get things in order so you can get back on track. And you just might need to spend a little more time of the off season just to rework things. And all of a sudden you'll look fine the next time you get on stage. But I don't recommend anyone getting back on the stage anytime soon if they have not corrected like the binge eating disorder,
For
because
sure.
you're kind of running into that same cycle, right? You're going to go
Yeah.
through a prep, you're going to get off the stage. What did you do differently this next time to prepare so that doesn't happen again? You know what I mean?
It's also such a foundational thing for long-term success to like okay, sometimes you may realize you're having trouble with binging that you would not have realized or food relationship in general that you wouldn't have realized without competing. I mean it peels back all the layers, right? Anything that wasn't going right is going to show up whenever you're trying to prep, if it's sleep, if it's stress management, whatever it is, and if you can't correct those foundational things, you're selling yourself short basically.
Yeah, yeah, you are. Again, yes, it's hard to be like, yes, if you reverse diet, it's going to help you metabolically and you're going to be in a better spot. Um, but it's also like you didn't ruin everything by binge eating either, you know. Obviously you need to address that issue and get it taken care of quickly because you don't want it to continue and you don't want it to dominate the rest of your life, especially if you plan on competing again down the road. You
Yeah.
just have to redirect. And there's other things that can be adjusted too, right? Like, okay, I spent a month and I binge ate, but now I've been 3 months with no binging and things are feeling good. Awesome. Then stay in an off season for like another year, maybe even 2 years, so
Yeah.
you feel good about where you're at. And then if you feel comfortable, you could do a mini cut, right? That's a whole other topic in itself, but then you could do a mini cut because you're in a better spot mentally and physically. Maybe you've lost 10 or 15 pounds and you've reversed dieted and gained 5 pounds back. You just
Mhm.
repositioned. You see what I'm saying? It didn't happen in
Yeah.
the first 3 months, but it happened within the next like 13 months. You know what I mean? So you just repositioned us all. Like there are still so many tools in the tool belt, and it's not done right here. It's just going to take a little bit longer. That's all.
I love that mindset around it. That's perfect. And I do want to ask, are you okay for time right now, so we can make sure we get through a couple more questions from the group?
Yeah, I have a little bit more time.
I'll wrap soon, I promise. And I'll stop asking so many questions that are just coming to my mind. So one that came from the group is what to eat. Athletes mentioned struggling with their food choices post show. Do you have any advice for that? The cravings that are probably coming up.
It's going to sound really bad, but I mean, volume foods, fruits, vegetables, similar foods that you were eating during prep, just eat more of them. Just because you're used to eating those foods right now at that time, like typically when we get close to a show, people are eating a lot more veggies because they're less calories and more food volume. And I know it's like the last thing people want to hear, or even rice cakes. Like I ate rice cakes for like a month. I don't want to eat them anymore. Okay, find something else that has a lot of volume to it because it's going to make your gut feel fuller.
Hmm.
Drink, you know, like 16 ounces of water before you eat. Eat some volume foods. That water is going to kind of help make you feel full for a little bit. Have some more water afterwards so you can hold that for a little bit. And then again, like depending on if there's like hunger pains, I understand, but if you're just feeling like hungry, that's not the end of the world to just feel hungry. Like it's okay if you're going to eat an hour and you're hungry now, it's okay just to be hungry.
Hmm.
Again, drink some water. If you have access and the ability, go walk around the house or go walk around the block for a few minutes just to keep the mind busy. And you'll feel better having more energy. And then all of a sudden it's time to eat again. So I would say
Yeah.
volume foods, continue volume foods until you start to feel better.
That's great advice. I like that. And then how should people communicate with their family and friends? We know that people get out of their competition season and their family and friends may want to show them how much they love them with food. So what are some of the boundaries and communication tactics that you recommend around that?
It's a tough one because all family is different. I was very fortunate to grow up around a very active family. Of course, when I first competed, they thought it was weird, but now like it's they're so used to it, right? Like my family will be like, "Hey, do you want to eat this?" And I'm like, "Nah, I already ate." They're like, "Okay, sounds good." They just leave it at that. Other people, their family members like, "No, one cookie won't hurt you, one this won't hurt you.
Yep.
Like you're skinny and you're this," and then the family doesn't realize what they're potentially triggering. So,
Yeah.
um, as awkward as it's going to be, you just have to be like, hey, like, I want to be present with you. I want to be in this moment with you and the family. I'm just not feeling really good of where I'm at right now. I don't feel comfortable eating a cookie because I have an all or none mindset. I'm just going to eat all of it. So,
Hmm.
like, I will be here. I will have maybe a diet Coke or something, or, you know, or I'll bring my own food and I'll eat with you. I'm just not ready mentally to be diving into this. I think most families, if people were just that upfront and honest about it in that tone and context, I think most family members would be understanding, like, okay, I understand, like, I get it. We want to celebrate because right, we are social creatures, even like introverts, you know, like I'm naturally extroverted, but like my wife is introverted and
Hmm.
we just introverts and they just don't want to like socialize as much, which I understand.
Yeah.
Um, but we're social beings. We still need to be sociable. So even with our families, and I say that because it's like the way we socialize is eating and drinking. That's just such a common thing, right? So we associate like having a good time and being sociable with eating or drinking. If you do have family that's always still forcing things like eat and drink this, like another thing that's helpful is just meet friends and family for coffee. You know,
Yeah. Kind of.
bring something else that's maybe still kind of in that line of like eating or drinking, but like go to a coffee shop and have coffee. You know, you can get black coffee. It doesn't have to be calories in there. You can still have that social interaction, or this sounds cheesy, but start a book club, a yoga club, do something else that's like
Yeah.
where you can be with the family. It just doesn't have to be around food, and you can have that conversation with them too, right? Like, hey, like right now I'm just not in a place mentally that I'm ready to jump into like eating more freely because I'm just not feeling very confident. Again, that does require us to be vulnerable, but if you have that conversation with your family, I think they'll understand. And then following it up with, could we just maybe like do things for coffee, or can we do yoga, or can we do a book club? Can we just do something that doesn't have to be solely based around like food or alcohol? You know, and again, that's going to
Yeah.
depend on your family. It's going to depend on how you are as a social creature or social being. The one thing I don't recommend is seclusion because I have done that. I've secluded myself during a prep. Don't do that. Be around people. Make sure it's positive people, obviously. But when you're by yourself and secluding, then those thoughts in the mind come, and that's when that can also trigger, you know, negative responses.
Yeah, that's such great comprehensive advice. I love that. I'm in the same camp as you where my family would not put pressure on me for food. And if I bring my own food, it's okay. It wouldn't be a big thing. But I've seen other families, like my sister-in-law is Chinese and like the culture is very different. Like it is like a forced food culture. Like I'm putting something in front of you to eat and I'm watching to see if you eat it. And if you don't eat it, you don't love me. It's like, it's a different concept. So I love the like just the upfront communication and maybe even educating them like, hey, my hormones are in a really tough place right now. When I went through this is what happened. Now that I'm coming back out of it, this is how this could really impact me negatively. And it sets up this cycle in my brain. And I mean, to some extent, maybe you can provide education for family members, but I love all of the advice that you had in that. It's definitely a tough thing.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, especially for like, you brought up a good point, like, well, I made this for you. You don't love me. No, no, no. I
Yeah.
do love you. I just know that and again, this is going to require us to be vulnerable. Like I don't have a good relationship with this, so I can't,
Hmm.
if I have one bite of that cake, I'm going to eat the whole cake.
Yeah.
Like maybe can you just cut me off a slice of cake and then bring it home with you? I don't want it in my house, and then that way I don't feel the urge if somebody has that relationship. Like I'll be vulnerable. Like I love pizza, right? Like I
Yeah.
just know like I will eat an entire pizza, right? So I'm not gonna have leftover pizza. I'm not going to. My wife makes fun of me because I was a wrestler. I don't want to share my pizza. Like if this is what I'm gonna have, I'm gonna eat the whole thing, right? Obviously I have a better relationship with pizza now, but my mindset's still there. When I start eating like one or two slices, I'm like, oh man, give me like 6 to 12
I'm
of these
in.
things. Like I'm in. I love this,
Yeah.
right? Um, but I just know my limits. I know where I'm at with it, and I'm okay with that. And I've had a long journey of myself where I can have that conversation. It doesn't bother me. I know what I need to do, and you know what I mean? It takes time to get to that point. So for those that are listening, that you have family members that are pressuring you and they think that you don't love them, you just have to say like, I love you. I just don't have a great relationship with this food or drink right now, and I'm just trying to ease back into things. And then family's going to come back and say, well, is that really healthy for you? And say, well, it's just a personal goal, is breaking your leg in
Yeah.
football healthy? Is breaking your ankle in volleyball healthy? Like we all take risks. This is just a risk that I decided to take and I'm working through it. And I just don't want to make things worse by like having one piece of cake because I'm going to have 12. And again, I think as long
Yeah.
as you're honest and vulnerable, as uncomfortable as it's going to be, I think family will understand. And then you have actions, right? You have other options that you can, book club, coffee, yoga. You can
Yeah.
provide other things to be social with the family that doesn't have to be around specifically food.
Such good advice. And really, that's a life skill that could translate to so many areas in our life is just setting those boundaries whenever it's tough to do so. So I love the comprehensive advice around that. So we're wrapping up on post-show success. We just to share with everybody listening, we were actually planning on talking about supplements today. Austin, this was so fun, and we went down so many tangents. I will have to circle back if that's okay with you to talk about supplements. But is there anything else that you want to share for post-show success? Any other general advice or things that we missed?
No, I would just to reiterate and add, like, make sure that you do have a good support system around you. This
Hmm.
group, from what I'm seeing, is a great support system. I know you can comment or post anonymously, like it's okay to be vulnerable. From what I'm seeing in the interaction of the group, there's a lot of people being supportive. So if you feel like you don't have support, I mean, this group's got a lot of people supportive in there. So just make sure that you put yourself in that position to where you can get positive feedback. And if you have concerns, if you're working with a coach, bring those concerns to your coach, bring them to your coach in a positive way. And just again, to summarize everything, be a little kinder to yourself for sure.
I love that. That's such great advice. Well, this is fantastic. I had a great time talking to you today. I can't wait to talk about supplements. You really are in a unique position to give advice on those and give us a little bit more background and explanation on the science too. So we'll circle back to that. But thank you for being here today. It was really wonderful chatting with you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. I'll stop the recording.